To continue, let me introduce another educator who contributed to transformative education. Renato Constantino is a Filipino nationalist, historian, and journalist. Also, Renato was a Filipino historian who taught us to re-examine, correct, and learn from our colonial history. In his landmark essay, The Miseducation of the Filipino, when we say miseducation based on the definition from the Merriam-Webster, it refers to poor, wrong, or harmful education. According to Navarro on his article, The Miseducation of Filipinos in the Year of Disaster, historian Renato Constantino emphasized that education in the Philippines, even after independence from the Americans, remains heavily colonial. Thus, he called for an education geared towards economic emancipation, political independence, and cultural renaissance. In the article of Professor Constantino, he was able to discuss how Philippine education was part of the American colonialism because education is a vital role in spreading nationalism. Nationalism became the dominant note in education and countries began to establish their own educational system to help achieve their national goals. Also, nationalism recognized that an efficient national system of education would promote national good. How's the nationalism in Filipinos in the context of education? There has been much nationalist activity in many areas of endeavor, but for him, we have yet to hear of a well-organized campaign on the part of our educational leaders for nationalism in education. Although most of our educators are engaged in a lively debate on techniques and tools for improved instruction, but not one major educational leader has come out for a truly nationalist education. Of course, some pedagogical experts have written on some aspects of nationalism in education. However, no comprehensive educational program has been advanced as a corollary to the programs for political and economic emancipation. So what is the outcome of this situation? This is a tragic situation, according to Professor Constantino, because the nationalist movement is crippled at the outset by the citizenry that is ignorant of our basic ills and is apathetic to our national welfare. He says that capturing the minds of the people is an effective way to overcome this tragic situation. So the most effective means of subjugating a people is to capture their minds. According to Professor Constantino, the molding of men's mind is the best means of conquest. Education, therefore, serves as a weapon in wars of colonial conquest. So for example, in leadership, you have to understand the situation of your subordinates in order for you to solve or to address the problem. In that way, you don't need to force them to obey or follow you. So in other words, it's how you take care of your people. The educational system of the Philippines was means of pacifying a people who were defending their newly won freedom from an invader who had posed as an ally. The education of the Filipinos under American sovereignty was an instrument of colonial policy. Their goal is for Filipino to be educated as a colonial by shaping their young minds to conform to American ideas. Indigenous Filipino ideals were slowly eroded in order to remove the last vestiges of resistance. Renato Constantino says that education served to attract the people to the new masters and at the same time to dilute their nationalism, which had just succeeded in overthrowing a foreign power. The Department of Education was never entrusted to any Filipino. The Vice Governor shall be the head of the Executive Department, known as the Department of Public Instruction. So according to him, We became literate in English to a certain extent. We are able to produce men and women who could read and write. We became more conversant with the outside world, especially the American world. So the goals of American education, first is the educational system was not established by the Americans for the sole purpose of saving the Filipinos from illiteracy and ignorance. The Filipinos had to be trained as citizens of an American colony. Philippine education was shaped by overriding factor of preserving and expanding American control. As an instrument of colonial policy, there was the decision to use English as the medium of instruction. So to sum it up, education is a vital weapon of a people striving for economic emancipation, political independence, and cultural renaissance. We are such a people. Philippine education, therefore, must produce Filipinos who are aware of this country's problem, who understand the basic solution to these problems, and who care enough to have courage to work and sacrifice for their country's salvation. The education of Filipino must be a Filipino. It must be based on the needs and goals of the nation.